and welcome to Enquire to Choir. My name is Eva and I'm here to help you, fellow choir people. How many times have you entered a room, a concert hall, and said, "Ooh, the acoustics is really good," or "Ooh, the acoustics is really bad"? Have you ever thought about what the word acoustics means? Acoustics is a branch of physics that deals with the study of mechanical waves in gases, liquids, and solids, including topics such as vibration, sound, ultrasound, and infrasound. Congratulations! This is a physics lesson. Don't go away. Calm down. I know this is a channel about choirs, but hear me out. I know it's not usual to connect science and music, but actually they're very connected. Most of the things that will be mentioned here you probably know, but you probably didn't connect that knowledge with the music you're doing with your choir yet. This is the reason why I wanted to do this video, because scientists, physicists have explained all of the things that we are dealing with when we are working with choirs when it comes to the propagation of sound. So it's worth looking into that knowledge that they have provided for us. Please do not be intimidated by this topic. I'm wearing a Mickey Mouse dress after all. There will be no heavy explanations. It's just about figuring out that phenomenons that happen are explainable. Because as you probably know, as a choir director and as a musician, you have to be prepared for any situation. Plus, if you give your choir instructions and back it up with a physics explanation, I think that gives you so much power. At least I can say that from my experience, that people tend to believe you if you explain a music thing with scientific stuff. If there are people out there who think that I, as a musician, what am I doing with this video? Why am I doing this video? I have a degree in electrical engineering and computing, and I'm certified for non-destructive testing, ultrasonic testing level 2. So I do have an official knowledge, and I do not want to disrespect anyone. I'm making this video to help choir directors and musicians out there to understand what acoustics is, how the sound behaves, and why certain things happen. So I hope you stick around, make yourself a cup of coffee or tea, and let's start with the video. Music. Sound. What is sound? Sound is a wave. We know waves, right? We've been to the sea probably, you have a perception of how they move. But actually what a wave is a disturbance of matter around the source that transmits outwards. You have the particles on an atomic level. They're in equilibrium, they're peaceful, they're not moving. And then a certain disturbance comes. So one particle or several particles are moved, and that movement disturbs the other particles that are next to them. So that movement starts spreading, and we perceive that as a wave. When you are not singing or speaking or producing sound, everything around you is chill. There are all these particles and they're just, chilling. But then somebody starts singing and starts to move the particles, and those particles start to move, and then a wave happens and it spreads. So you know how people say that music moves people? That is actually true. When we produce a wave, we move matter. What that tells us is this: in order for the sound to propagate properly, you need particles. There have to be particles out there that are movable. And second, not every particle is the same, obviously. Meaning the particle in steel and the particle of air are very different. So when we sing, mostly our medium around us is air. We tend not to sing in water. There is a reason for that. However, the quality of air, as you know, can really differ depending on the temperature, the humidity, the particles of stuff in the air. In Croatia, we have very warm summers with humidity that is not as great, but at a certain point in the year, the air becomes humidified and it's really difficult to sing. So if you have ever thought that it is different to sing in a lower temperature and in a higher temperature, or when there is a lot of humidity in the air and when there is not, you're absolutely right. Why am I speaking about this? Because the air, the quality of air in the room that you're practicing in, the quality of air in the concert hall matters, and it affects the acoustics. So if it's a really rainy day outside and you're arriving to the rehearsal, it will be a very different rehearsal than if it's a glorious sunny day without rain. The sound wave you will make will spread is a different thing. So you're not crazy if you think that, wow, it is really difficult to sing today. It probably is because of all the atmosphere around you. There are many kinds of sound. Not every sound is a tone, and we in music are producing tones. Tones have a regular disturbance of matter. That means that when the particles are disturbed, their movement is periodic, which means that there is a pattern in behavior that can be described with certain parameters. We will only do one formula, and that is this one. It has 3 letters. V is for velocity or the speed of sound. Lambda is for the wave length. And F is for the frequency that is measured in hertz. The speed of sound depends on the material that it's spreading in. I mentioned steel. 5,920 meters per second is the velocity of a longitudinal wave in steel. In air, it's 343 at 20 Celsius. So there is a difference. The speed of sound depends on the material, but in a constant material, it's a constant. It doesn't change in the same media. It does change in a different media, but we'll talk about it later. So you have sound in the air, and that sound is just traveling and living its best life. How do we characterize it? By 2 things to make that velocity a constant. We have lambda, that is the wavelength. This is a particle. It starts moving here and it goes like this. And when it comes to the same level as it were before, that's considered one wavelength. Just saying, because I want to be precise, the wavelength is not the length of the wave. It's the length of the oscillation. You can think of it as the length of a string on a violin, for example. And the 3rd letter in this formula is frequency. We know about frequencies. We relate to frequencies a lot because when we talk about people's ears, we talk about frequencies. So the frequency spectrum that human ear can recognize is from 20 hertz to 20 kilohertz. Below the 20 hertz, it doesn't recognize, it doesn't hear it. And above 20 kilohertz, it also doesn't hear it. Above 20 kilohertz is ultrasound, and below 20 hertz is infrasound. How do we perceive frequencies? As pitch. So the higher the frequency, the higher the pitch. So when you have a musical fork, a tuning fork, for example, that says 440 hertz, that's actually a 440 hertz, and then everybody tunes to that tuning fork, and everybody is at the right frequency, which means at the right pitch. If the velocity should stay constant and the frequency changes, that means that the wavelength is affected. You know that a violin is the highest string instrument and its strings are the shortest, while bass it's a huge instrument which has really long strings, and the pitch the bass performs is really low. The frequency spectrum that it has is in a low frequency spectrum. So it's logical that the higher the frequency, the smaller the wavelength. And you may think that this is not important, but if you're handling choirs, it is important because it shows that the wavelength of your soprano is much different than a wavelength of your bass. It's a completely different thing. And if you remember, I mentioned in one of the videos previously, I said when the basses are singing a lot of words in a really quick melody, in a really fast melody, that may come off as complete mashup of words. They have to pronounce really well in order for the basses to be understood as well as the rest of the choir. That's because of a physical thing, that's because of the wavelength. That said, singing lower frequency has its benefits, and there is a reason why we react to a deeper voice in a different way than to a higher voice. Stick around, we'll get to it. Are you okay? Is this too much? It's actually too much for me, but I'm sticking with it. We talked about velocity and that in the same material, in the same medium, the velocity could be considered a constant. However, there are many materials around us, and when we are singing, the best case scenario is that we are disturbed only by the dimensions of the whole of the room we are singing in, a very different material than air is. So in that sense, those walls of the room can be considered an obstacle for the wave, because when the wave comes to the wall, the sound stays in the room. You have to know that when a wave is traveling in the same media, so in air, it's just traveling, chilling, no problems, and then it arrives to a wall. What do you think it happens? You will probably say it reflects. That is true, but not always. It will reflect, but not just reflect. And the amount of reflection you will get depends on the material. It depends mostly on the border of those two mediums. It depends on that border. It depends on the type of a wave. It depends on the amount of energy the wave had when it came to that border. A certain amount of sound that arrives to an obstacle will reflect from that obstacle. A certain amount of sound will go into that obstacle, into that second material. But I'm sure you have heard of reflectors and absorbers. When you construct a concert hall, for example, the concert hall is in a specific shape. There is a reason for that. And then probably you see all of these strange or unusual boxes or shapes. Why is that? Because some materials are absorbers and some materials are reflectors. For example, in a reflector, the amount of reflected wave, the amount of reflected energy is much higher for that material than the energy that is absorbed in it. The complete opposite is for the absorbers. That sound, that wave stays in that material. Why am I talking about this? Because when you arrive to a concert hall, when you arrive to your rehearsal space, take a look at the space and recognize where waves come to an obstacle and whether the materials are reflectors or absorbers. For example, I mentioned that a few times here on the channel. One of the biggest absorbers in one of the concert halls I constantly have to perform with, one of my choirs, had a huge curtain, a huge, heavy, thick curtain. And it turned out that it was a huge absorber for lower frequencies. So my basses who were standing close to that curtain were not heard. So that's the reason why I had to put my basses someplace else, because it wasn't working. They would yell and I wouldn't hear them, nor would the audience. The reason why a certain concert hall has good acoustics is because that is heavily engineered And the point of good acoustics is that anywhere in the audience, the sound is the same as it is on the stage. So when you come to a concert hall, to your rehearsal space, just give it your best to recognize where the problems could be, how the sound travels, which way the waves go, and how you will position your choir members on the stage. That is the reason why it's a really big difference if you're singing in a closed space and in an open space. In an open space, the sound just travels. It's not focused anywhere. It's not focused in the concert hall because there are no walls. If you had a feeling while singing outside that you're singing in void, that is actually true. There is a really specific example of this. That's when you have a sound check. When you have a sound check, in most cases, the audience is empty and the sound travels all around and you feel like the sound check is really bad. But then you come to the performance and people fill the audience space and the sound is, it seems like it's much easier to sing. There is a reason for that, because all of those people are reflectors and you hear yourself better and the sound is more focused. So it comes down to you are producing the sound or your choir is producing a sound. When it goes, where does it go? How does it travel? Is there an obstacle? What kind of an obstacle is it? You don't have to calculate anything, but just think. A sponge is absorbent and the wall is not, because the particles are different. You can affect that sound by positioning your choir on the stage better, in a more thoughtful way, in a smarter way. Maybe that means it will not be a conventional way, but I've done that many times and I've never been to prison for it. So resonance. Okay, so let's talk about resonance. That is something that many people say and we always talk about, to give it more resonance. We do vocal technique to give it more resonance. And what is resonance? Okay, so we all have our space, okay? Body space, for example, or system around us has interactions, the way the things are shaped, the way they correlate to each other, the way the sound travels. Every system has their best frequency, which means at that frequency, they oscillate better, they move better, they start to move in a natural way the best. For example, this is a very silly example, but I'm sure you've been in that situation. You're in a room which has lighting above on the ceiling, and you're talking or they're singing, and at a certain point you hear the lamp go tsh. That means that the singing or the speaking hit the resonant frequency. When we are aiming to perform a certain pitch, it's a certain frequency, and if you give it more resonance, that means that it will travel better. When you hit the resonant frequency of the system, then the sound becomes easier. It has more energy, and that's why we work on that resonance when we do vocal technique, because the resonance has bigger influence, and that resonance takes us to harmonics. Have you ever wondered why harmony, chords, choral arrangements are written in a certain way? Well, there was this guy called Pythagoras. In the 6th century BC, he figured out that when a string vibrates, it has its main frequency and harmonic frequencies. We talked about pitch. So if we sing C, that is a certain frequency we are singing to get the pitch of a C. But as you probably know, that main frequency has other frequencies, and they are not random frequencies, they are harmonics. All of these frequencies are weaker when it comes to amplitude. They are not as loud, but they do exist and they influence something that is called timbre. If you have the main frequency, the main pitch, the first harmonic is double the frequency, which is an octave higher. The next one is in ratio again, 2 versus 3, when it comes to the first harmonic. So yes, when you're singing a tone and when a string is producing a tone, we hear the main frequency as the pitch, but the harmonics are other frequencies heavily engineered by nature to behave in a certain way that are less loud, their amplitude is lower, but they're present and they affect the sound. For example, if you have a C, its harmonics are these. Please recognize the first 5 notes. When you rearrange them, they construct something that we know as, in this case, a major chord. So the reason why all of the harmony is written in this classical way is to be supportive of the harmonics, because if you support that, it gives better resonance. So if you ever thought about how a choir sound is different and why the orchestra sound is different, it's because we are supporting with music, the way the music is written, we are supporting a natural behavior of a wave. That's the reason why I keep saying here on the channel that we should correlate to each other in the choir. Everyone can be in tune, but if one singer is not, it will sound out of tune because the ratios are disturbed. And the reason why certain ensembles have a much better sound is because they're so in tune with each other, literally, that they produce a really vibrant, full of resonance sound. There is a reason why it's called harmony, and harmonics are a part of this harmony. So when we talk about being in tune, that is a much bigger thing. We could all be really in pitch and sound awful because we are not relating to each other. We have answered a question here on the channel a while ago, which was connected to this, why a choir member can't repeat the tone played on the piano and can repeat the tone played by a singer. I will link it here. And the other representation of this harmonic structure is the fact that when you have an inexperienced singer in your choir, a new singer that is a good singer but is not used to singing in choirs, you hear them going to other lines, going to other voices, or singing in the wrong octave. That is not because they don't have a good ear. That's because their ear has to learn how to recognize the main frequency. So it's a very different thing if somebody's singing wrong notes or altogether, or if somebody is singing the notes from other voices. The second situation is much better because eventually they will learn how to recognize the main frequency. Now I think I'm done. I cannot believe I actually managed to finish this video. I wanted to stop like 4 times. Things I do for love. So thank you for watching. Thank you for being here. If you wish to see more from this crazy chick on the YouTube channel called Enquire to Choir, you can subscribe. You can watch all of the other videos here. Yeah, that is it. I don't know how it is for you. It is the end of the concert season in my country, so I'm working on projects for autumn, and I'm really happy to see how many people are here on the channel. I'm very, very blessed and surprised. I see a big upgrade when it comes to the amount of views. So thank you for being here, and I hope you find this video helpful and the channel as well. Conduct well, conductors, and I'll see you next time. Bye!